Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, host of KPBS Evening Edition, and I am delighted to be moderating this Q&A from our virtual screening room for the award-winning documentary, No Greater Love. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight. Joining us is the director and producer of No Greater Love, Justin Roberts, who, as you saw from the film, was also Army chaplain of No Slack. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And we're also joined by Amber Robinson. She is a U.S. Army combat veteran, veteran advocate, and GI Film Festival Advisory Committee member. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. And I want to remind everybody who's watching that you can submit a question for our panel through the online form just below your video window on your virtual screening page. So let's get started. This award-winning documentary really truly gives an experience we could not have had if it were not for the efforts of Army Chaplain Justin Roberts and his documenting of his fellow soldiers' perspectives, both during deployment as well as after. So Justin, my first question is going to be for you. The first quote that we see following the open of them, it says, "The longest road is not the one to war, but the road home." Please tell us, give us a sense of how this quote encapsulates the film. This was you.
It's I wanted people to understand that the mindsets as you go to war, you haven't experienced it yet. So many people they get into it quickly, not understanding what they're getting themselves into, the sacrifices it's going to take, and the toll that it takes, on your life. And so going to war is not as complicated as coming home from it. And that, as I had one World War II veteran told me, he's still working on. And so this is a long journey that we don't always see the end to. That's what I was trying to communicate.
And as an Army chaplain, you were prohibited from carrying a weapon, but you may have been carrying something that was even more valuable to you and to your fellow soldiers, and that is the camera. How did this visual experience in combat help you and possibly even change you?
As far as just capturing it all, it was the one thing that I thought I could do aside from, when I was providing care for the soldiers, when I was ministering, helping to patch up the wounded, all that kind of stuff, that took priority first. But when I wasn't doing that, I wanted to capture some of these moments. And for me, so much of it was I didn't want these people to be forgotten. I didn't want this to be lost in time. I didn't want their stories just to disappear. I needed people to remember them. And so that helped me. It gave me a purpose, while I was capturing it, but also when I got home.
Amber, let me ask you this question. As civilians, we're often told that wounds are not always physical. Can you explain the complexity of what that means?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question, for me particularly, but I think for all veterans, not all of us veterans, not all of us disabled veterans, come home and have wounds that are visible, and I know that, I know that everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's PTSD is not something that you can see right away. It's not like an arm missing, and it's not like an appendage that's gone. You're not in a wheelchair. By all accounts, you look normal. But then in a blink of an eye, something can trigger you, a loud noise, or you're put into a situation that is just a little bit stressful, and all of a sudden you're back, in scary moments in Afghanistan. You're experiencing anxiety attacks, depression. There's so many different things that come along with PTSD. And if you were to go and stay with a veteran in their home, a veteran who has PTSD, and watch them for a couple of days, then you would see like, oh wow, you would see the effects of their invisible illness. But otherwise you can't really tell, but that's one of
Well, watching this film, can you tell us what in particular might have resonated with you?
Oh, wow. The whole entire film, front to back, everything resonated with me. It was, remember when I first watched it, you know, I'm an OAF veteran as well. So Operation Enduring Freedom, that's Afghanistan. So I've got three and a half years, so 3 tours in Afghanistan. So immediately I recognized, you know, where they were. You know, I felt this instant sense of nostalgia. You know, it's kind of odd the way that us combat veterans tend to miss war. You know, when we come home, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, it was a big sense of nostalgia initially. And then of course, as you know, Justin kind of spins the story and tells us about all of these, you know, amazing men that he served with. You know, your heart just kind of starts to swell, at least mine does. You know, my heart just swelled and swelled, you know, because these men reminded me of so many that I've served with. You know, their courage reminded me of so many that I've served with. You know, and then of course I end the film in tears. I've watched it 3 times and I just watched it again. You know, and ended it in tears, you know, because I felt it so much, because it was just so reminiscent of, you know, so much that I've been through. So it spoke to me, you know, on that level. And I know it's speaking to so many other veterans just like that as well. So.
Justin, you said that this film took you 7 years to make. That's from deployment to when it made it to the screen. What was your initial intention for when you started shooting this? And did that intention change over the years?
My first intention was trying to stay alive, because my commander said I could shoot film. He's like, just don't get shot. So that's what I was trying to do. But I don't know. I knew in part that this was a powerful story, and it was a story about my friends. And so I was trying to figure out how to capture it. And when I started seeing some of the pieces coming together, it was closer towards the end that I was like, I think we have a full film, and I don't know how to make a film though. And so I talked to the commander, I talked to the team, and just let them know. I was like, hey, I want to put this together as a documentary. But it wasn't until close to the end of the deployment that we really started kind of getting a full scope of it. And we were still just in such a fast motion with the operations that there wasn't really a whole lot of time to think about it anyways. You just had to keep capturing it and capturing the stories. And then when I got home, that's when we started putting it together.
And so what made you decide what to include? And was the footage that maybe that you didn't use, was it helpful to families to watch? Or
Yeah.
did you share it?
Yeah, I think it was, and it helped them to see and understand what their loved one was going through, and to also understand um, the effects of PTSD, the struggles that they were going through, sometimes still mourning and grieving, and to understand what those experiences were like. It's so hard to communicate that, and it's so hard to put it into words. So some soldiers told me this, they just showed the film, and that helped the families to understand a little bit more.
Amber, one concept that Justin touched upon in the film, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, is that combat is addicting. As a veteran yourself, did you find this to be true for yourself as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really weird. You know, my first tour was 16 months. You know, I did a normal 12 months. You know, Army deployments are usually 12 months. So I did that. And then we got extended, to Kunar province, where this film is filmed. Yeah, so when I got back after that 6 months, I really had no idea how to be an American anymore. You know, I wanted to haggle in Walmart like you would haggle in a bazaar, you know, where you can haggle with the vendors. You know, so it was, you know, it was very difficult to come home and be in America again. And I remember when I got back to Afghanistan during my second tour, that feeling I felt, like I almost relaxed, you know. And I remember looking out, like we got to Bagram. That's like the main place. Bagram Air Force Base is where they send like all of everybody that's deploying to Afghanistan. You know, you get there, you know, before you go to your respective other like forward operating bases. I remember getting there, putting my stuff down and looking out over those mountains, you know, and just feeling this wonderful calm. It was just so odd, feeling like, oh man, good to be back. and I felt that during my third deployment as well, and then recently my little brother, he's also in the Army. And he recently went on his third deployment. And I remember when he left, I felt jealous. I felt so jealous that he was leaving. I'm not really sure what it is. Maybe it is that the adrenaline, that kind of comes. But yeah, it still feels that way. There's still a part of me that wants to go back, and thinks that maybe one day I will. Who knows.
And watching the film, for civilians especially, it's hard to imagine how one would choose to want to go back after an injury. But this is something that Justin really did talk about. Justin, why don't you help us answer this? Can you explain to us what that means in terms of, we talked about this before, warrior culture?
Hmm. Yeah, it's so many of them, whenever they get wounded, that's the first thing that they want to do is figure out how they can get back. And many of them would even lie to doctors. They would do whatever it took to get back by the soldiers that they love. And we don't throw that word around a lot. It's a soft word, but that's what it is. And it's a selfless love for the people that they're serving with. And they don't want them to go through combat alone. And there's so much regret if they're not able to make it back to them or they're ordered back early. I even had a soldier who was going to attempt suicide because he lost a friend who was still over with us, but he was ordered to go back early to kind of set up for it to receive everybody and wife and kids, everything. But there was so much guilt over not being there with his friends. And so there's this amazing attachment that's one of the most powerful forces I've ever seen. This kind of selfless love and this dedication to each other. Um, it's hard to articulate it. I mean, like the film was really just my best attempt to try to explain stuff because I don't have good words for a lot of it.
And would watching a film like this allow veterans to be able to process their own experience?
I,
Was that part of the reason that who this film is for?
yeah, it's kind of a wide shot group of what I was hoping to do. I mean, that's the first audience I wanted to reach, though.
Mhm.
It's just to communicate to those people that I cared about and I loved. To help them understand and process it in some ways, because it's multiple different types of injuries that we put in there. We had over 200 Purple Hearts. So there was a lot of different types of stories that I could have used. What I tried to do is use different types. So that way there would be a variety of experiences that they could then mirror process. So they're watching a person who's going through that, processing their wounds, the trauma, talking about the impact, then processing through what it was like in the healing process, and then working towards their next purpose and what they're doing. And so the whole goal was that as a veteran, or active military member is watching it, then they're connecting with the people in front of the screen, and then they're mirror processing it. So that person worked through their trauma in this way. Maybe I can too.
We have a question from a viewer right now, and this one is for Justin. We also have one for Amber, but we'll start with Justin. There was a line in the film, quote, "How do you come home? How can we change our culture to support and value the service and sacrifice?" Can you expand on that for us?
How do you come home? Um, and how do you the dealing with the culture and shifting that? I think that that's one thing I would like to touch on, and I'll be very brief about it. But the culture, um, with PTSD, with suicide, so much of that we look at it as an outside problem within the American culture or a problem that the VA needs to tackle and fix. And the truth of the matter is something we need to shift within our own culture, giving each other permission to talk about our issues, both within the military and outside of it, is one of the biggest struggles that we have as a warrior culture. And we keep looking for the scapegoat of an outside source being the source of the problem, but it's actually within our own culture. We don't give each other permission to talk about our issues. And the unit that's featured in this film was one of the most suicidal battalions in 2009. The number one thing that we had to work on was shifting the culture within that battalion. So these bunch of infantry dudes could talk about their junk, all their problems and issues with each other without fear of judgment. And when we broke through that, we had a 70% reduction in suicidal ideations, and it stopped the suicides. So I'm not theorizing about this stuff. I'm telling you, it's the culture is a big part of the problem. There's so much amazing stuff about our American warrior culture, but there are some serious issues we need to tackle. I love you guys. I'm talking to all of them right now.
For Amber, this is a question from a viewer. What local San Diego groups are making a difference in transitioning vets?
Oh goodness, there's so many. You know what? You know, I have to do a shameless, plug.
Please do.
For myself.
Please do.
Okay. So, I co-founded a small nonprofit here in San Diego when I moved here and got out of the service in 2014. And I wanted to tackle veterans issues through that nonprofit. And the first one that I tackled was military sexual trauma, and that was before I'd even really started to look at my own PTSD, and it was working with those women, through the first event that I kind of put together was an MST event, but the individuals that came, they were the ones that looked at me and they said, hey, we think you have PTSD, but it was such an amazing experience that I just continued to do workshops, focusing on military sexual trauma. And now I run a annual workshop called Shout and Stop, where we use theater and creative movement to pave alternative pathways to healing. So it's kind of a way to kind of realign body, mind, and spirit. It's amazing what performance arts can do. But then, when I first started to tackle my own PTSD, I went to the vet centers. And I still do group therapy, and I do individual therapy through vet centers. They're not a part of the actual VA. They're an offshoot of the VA, and they were started by Vietnam veterans who were tired of the system, tired of the kind of arduous system of the VA, which it is. The VA is a creaking system. We just have so many veterans that need help. So the VA struggles, I know it does, but vet centers are an offshoot, and they don't provide medication or anything like that. They only provide therapy. But the type of therapy that they provide is amazing. So, if you're not getting what you need through the VA, try vet centers. And then here in San Diego, also there's the San Diego Women's Veterans Network. That's run by Billy K. Boughton. And basically, she holds meetings like monthly, and veterans from all over can just come and talk about what they're doing, connect, network. That's like, I could keep going. I'm not going to keep going. I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. But that's just a sampling. That's just a sampling of some of the organizations. We've got things going on in San Diego, so it's good.
And another question for Justin from an audience member who says that these times that we live in are overwhelming. Do you have any advice for vets in general?
That's a big one.
That's a big question. It's a big question.
That's a good question.
Where would one start? Where would one start?
I honestly, I can only tell you what's worked for me, because when I came back, I had a lot of stuff that I had to work through, and I'm still working through it. And I have a friend, one of my best friends, he's a former combat medic. He helped me just to walk through this journey too. So we started calling each other, and it was just giving each other permission to talk about what we're struggling with was the biggest thing. And to just simply say like, hey, so I'm having one of those days, man, and for me, it's depression and just shutting down. And so that was the person that just by talking about it, I didn't feel like shutting down. And it helped me so much just to keep on marching forward. The most important thing, though, is figuring out what your purpose is once you get out. That next transition, you have to know what you're passionate about, what you're inspired to do, what you want to get up and go do with your life. It's the next chapter. And you can't spend the rest of your life talking about or thinking about just your past. You have to turn the page. That's what makes the book good. And so I think that so many veterans, they spend so much, or people who are in the military spend so much time, so much energy becoming that person. and you were an awesome, incredible person in that chapter, but that's not the book. And it's not the book for anybody unless you're one of the fallen. Your story has to go on, and part of that's going to be honoring those people who fell, but it's also figuring out what that next chapter is for you. And so that's it, purpose and support.
That's great advice. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much to Justin and to Amber for joining me for this evening and being a part of this first ever GI Film Festival San Diego virtual showcase. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to give a special thank you also to all those involved for making the showcase possible, including our wonderful advisory committee members, of which Amber is a member, the staff working behind the scenes here at KPBS, the Film Consortium San Diego, and as well as our festival sponsors, the California Arts Council and Scatina Daniels Communications. In the email reminder that you got for this screening, there was a link to our attendee survey. So please, it just takes a few minutes of your time, and your feedback is really going to help us make 2021 GI Film Festival San Diego the best event that it can be. And we all look forward to seeing you there. So the full festival and the juried film competition takes place May 18th through the 23rd of 2021. We hope to see you there. Our virtual screening continues tomorrow at 5 p.m. with 2 stories of World War II pilots who broke barriers in their service to America. So join us for that. Thank you so much, and good night.